Hello, welcome to Spaniard School, the Student Podcast. I'm your host, Charlie the Spaniard Brenneman, former junior and senior high Spanish teacher and UFC fighter. And I created this podcast, Spaniard School, to help you, students, overcome challenges in your life and navigate the ups and downs, get through life, essentially. I'm here to share my experiences as a professional fighter, as a speaker, as an author, as a podcaster, as a wrestler, as a human, because I remember what it's like in middle and high school. And I remember how difficult it is. And I learned a lot of these valuable lessons through fighting that I'm now going to convey to you in the form of today's question and answer session. So when I go to schools and do school assemblies, one of my favorite parts of those assemblies is the afterwards Q&A, is fielding, answering your questions, interacting back and forth. And way back during the pandemic, when my assemblies had to be virtual, I started doing these Q&As virtually. And I recently visited West Hempfield Middle School in Western PA. Shout out to West Hempfield. And so I recorded a Q&A recently, and I thought, well, I'll use some of those questions as well as other questions that I've gotten over the last couple of years to answer your questions. Now, granted, you personally may have not have submitted this question, but chances are if you're in middle or high school, you're dealing with these exact questions. Maybe you're wondering these exact same things. And if it's not the exact same things, it's quite possibly something that you have or will come across in your life thus far or shortly into the future. So I'm going to dive into these questions. And if you have any further questions, I'll mention it again at the end of this episode. But if you have any further questions, utilize the links below. If you're listening via my podcast, Spaniard School, you can just click on those links, submit a question. Or if you're listening on YouTube, again, utilize those links below and submit your questions, and I'll add them to my folder. So I'm going to dive into your questions. The first one, did you ever feel like you didn't belong because of doing the UFC? That's a great question. Yes. The short answer to that question is yes. And you might think to yourself, well, if someone is living in the public eye, if they're a professional athlete, if they're on television, if they're active and involved in social media, how could they feel alone? One of the interesting things that I've found out is I'm a very intense person. Right? By nature, I'm a very intense person. I'm a very driven person. So it sets me apart. It sets me aside. I'm not necessarily like everybody else. So I'm kind of obsessive about training. I'm kind of obsessive about nutrition. I love it. I love it more than the average person. So yes, I have felt alone because I set my goals really, really high and I work really, really hard to achieve them. And oftentimes that has me make choices that puts me by myself. Maybe I'll wake up extra early. Maybe I won't go to a party. Maybe I won't go out to dinner. Maybe I won't go to a movie because I'm really focused and dedicated on my goal, that it causes me to feel alone inside. And that's something that if you are feeling that way, understand that you're not the only one. Understand that there are other people like myself going through that feeling as well. The next question, were you bullied? If so, did that affect your career in any way? That's a great question. Again, I think the short answer to that question would probably be yes. Maybe it was just kids being mean, middle school kids being mean, high school kids being mean. I think that's unfortunately a part of middle and high school life. And if so, did that affect your career in any way? This is kind of, I think it's a little bit funny. I feel like that probably subconsciously drove me in part to become a professional fighter. I just remember walking around middle and high school, constantly feeling like I was going to get beat up. When I think of middle school, high school, I just feel like I'm going to get beat up. And I remember hating that feeling. So probably subconsciously, somewhere deep inside of me, developing the ability to fight, developing the ability to protect myself, to defend myself, building and developing self-confidence and self-esteem. I probably feel like my middle and high school years had something to do with that. And I want to point this out too. The point of training to become a mixed martial artist, training martial arts, training wrestling is not to become a bully. It's the opposite to become a bully. Training gives you a self-confidence to which you realize, hey, I don't need to fight people. I don't need to push people around. I don't need to be a bully. If I need to defend myself one day because there's no way out, yeah, then that'll come in handy. But otherwise, it's not to become a bully yourself. Here's an adversity question. What is the best way to overcome a hard time? I heard this quote. I believe it was first, I'm going to butcher it a little bit, but I believe it was first said by Robert Frost, the poet, but it's something like, the only way through is through. So I've hit a lot of hard times in fighting. Behind me there, if you're watching the video on YouTube, you see like really cool pictures of fighting. There were a lot of really low times as well. Getting knocked out, getting choked out, getting TKO'd, knocked on my butt, kicked across the face, beat up bad on live television, a lot of low points. The only way through is through. The best way through a tough time is to keep putting one foot in front of the other to get through that tough time. That being said, some of the things that help me, I know which habits are good for me. I know that eating healthy foods, I know that drinking lots of water, I know that exercise, I know that being around people, I know that talking to people about my feelings, I know that getting the right amount of sleep, I know those habits are positive habits that help me feel better. So no matter how low I was feeling, I always did those positive habits that I knew were good for me. The next one, have you ever had trouble with overthinking or mentally, how do you get through it? I'm laughing because if you could be inside my brain, you would be exhausted, because in between my ears, I think a lot. I overthink a lot. And this kind of ties to the previous question. The way I get through overthinking is that I don't allow it to create inactivity. I don't allow my fears. I don't allow my worries. I don't allow my anxieties. I don't allow my doubting, my self-doubts. I don't allow them to stop me from doing or pursuing my goals. So if I want to be a professional fighter and I'm afraid of not being good enough, or I'm fearful of being on camera, or I'm afraid of going to train because it's so hard, if deep down I really want to achieve that goal, I never let those fears prevent me from doing that thing. And in time, that gives you strength, not muscle strength, but that gives you strength of character. It shows you that, hey, I am a strong person and I can get through these tough times. Next one, was there ever a point in time when you wanted to quit? I think this is really, it's a great question and it's a valuable lesson. The short answer is yes, 100%. There were probably 1,000 or 1,000,000 times when I wanted to quit. Every morning when I wake up at 41 years of age and I don't want to work out, that is a time that I want to quit. When I'm running sprints, still to this day, those are times that I want to quit. But I believe in giving all of myself. I believe in trying my best. It makes me feel good as a human to give my best. And there are times when I give my best and I quit. Like if I'm on a treadmill at 10.0 miles per hour, I have to put my hands on the rails. I have to jump off, because if not, I'll fall and I'll get seriously hurt. So just because you give all of yourself doesn't mean that sometimes you don't stop or quit or change direction or pursue another goal. At one point in time, I realized that, hey, professional fighting is not what I want to be doing right now. My values changed. So I pivoted. I went in a different direction. I changed my goals, but then I started pursuing those new goals. So I do think it's important to have a vision or a goal in your life that you're working toward, and understanding that from time to time, those goals and vision will change and adjust. The next one, is there a possible point of overworking yourself to achieve your goal? 100%. As I said before, I'm a very intense person. I'm very driven. And sometimes if you let that drive and determination and commitment and discipline, if you let it get out of control, it can start to have a negative effect on your life. So for example, I love to train, right? I love to train. I love being around fitness. I love pushing myself. I love doing jujitsu and wrestling and lifting weights and kettlebells, et cetera. But if I'm training so hard to be healthy that it takes me away from my family and my kids and my role as a father and husband, then that's probably not, it's definitely not a good thing. So yes, rest, recovery, downtime, family time, friend time, relaxing, go for a walk time. As intense as I am, I also understand and value those times as well. The next one, how do you stay motivated to meet your goals? So because there are times, many times, that I feel like quitting, two things keep me going. The one is that fundamental belief that I believe as a human, I should do my best. I owe it. I'm here on earth. I should do my best. That's just like a belief that I have as a person. And if I don't give my best, I feel like I'm cheating at life. So that drive is in me, and that helps keep me going. But also this, if you're having trouble staying motivated toward your goals and you find yourself not getting out of bed to exercise or go to school, or you find yourself not studying to do well on the test, or you find yourself not practicing your instrument or putting in the work to achieve your goal, stop thinking about yourself and think about other people. If you're having trouble getting out of bed and going to school, think to yourself, you know what? If I went to school, I could help Mr. Smith clean up his room after class or lunch or the experiment in chemistry, and that would make him feel good. Or I really don't want to get out of bed right now, but if I go downstairs and help pack my little brother or sister's lunch, that's really going to help mom or dad. So if you're having trouble, whether it's a small goal or whether it's a big goal, if you're having trouble pursuing that goal, rather than thinking about how it is for you, think of how your action can help someone else. The next question, it says, what are the names of your books? What inspired you to write them? So I love reading books. I think books are awesome. You can see them if you're watching the video. You can see I have stacks and stacks behind me. I've written 2 books. They're over my shoulder right there. The first one is called Driven, My Unlikely Journey from Classroom to Cage. The other one is called Becoming the World's Toughest Lifelong Learner. The first book, it's a I'll say a perfect book for middle and high school students, as well as older folks. It tells my story. And if you've seen my school presentation, it's a lot more in depth. The ins and outs of growing up in a small town with a big goal, with a big dream, the ins and outs of fighting professionally in the UFC, as well as some injury stories as well. My second book, Becoming the World's Toughest Lifelong Learner, is kind of life after fighting. It's, hey, this is what I did, and this is what I'm doing now, and this is what it looks like. It's a kind of a personal development, business development book that if you are someone who wants to write your own path, create your own path in life, I share a lot of lessons that I've learned the last 5-6 years since fighting in building a speaking, podcasting, and writing business. The next one, it says, so my grandma is currently in the hospital due to her cancer and some other complications. I can really relate to your story with your brother. So my brother, I talk about in my presentation, he and my mom are both sick, and we're very, very sick. My brother still is at this point. Is there anything that helps you cope with what is going on right now in your life that you might be able to share? As with the adversity question, when my brother was diagnosed with brain cancer, my mom was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, and they were literally clinging to life at various points, and we still don't know the outcomes. It's very difficult to deal with. And 2 of the most valuable things, again, that I've talked about, that I'm going to repeat, the one is the habits. Exercise and nutrition and proper rest and reading, to be honest, are things that I do on a regular basis that I know make me feel better as a human. So as sad as I am, or as much as I'm crying about maybe losing my mom or not knowing the future of my brother, as down, and lonely as I feel, I never don't do the habits or actions that I know are good for me. I know that being lazy all day and eating junk food and drinking soda, I know it's not good for me. So I wake up and I drink water and I eat healthy foods and I exercise and I be outside as much as possible. I be around people who are kind and caring as much as possible. And the second thing is I talk openly and honestly about how I'm feeling. A lot of times we can feel like you got to act tough and you can't cry and you can't show emotion. I'm the opposite of that. I cry and show emotion on a regular basis. And I really believe that helps me feel better. It prevents me from feeling like I'm carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. The next one, I'll answer 2 more here. How has adversity changed your life? Adversity has changed my life for the better. The lessons that I have to share with you come from adversity. The strength of character that I have as a person, the drive and determination and ambition that I have as a person, my desire to help other people who are hurting as a person, they come from my adversities in life and the lessons that I learned, and then using those lessons to help other people. So, in the moment, yeah, I would have loved to win, or I would have loved to not suffer that difficult challenge, but it happened. And I've learned that, hey, I have the the ability, the choice to choose how I'm going to react to this. And then I can actually turn that around and help other people with it. So that's how adversity has changed my life. And then lastly, if you could describe yourself in 3 words, what would those words be? That's a great question. I think intense would be one. I think driven would be another one. And I think something along the lines of overthinker or self-doubter would be the third one. So intense for sure, driven for sure, and then something to do with all the noise and all the chatter that is in my brain that also has tended to be negative or doubting or fearful toward myself. So those are the 3 adjectives. So again, if you're a student that submitted one of these questions recently from West Hempfield or in the past from one of the various schools that have done these Q&As, I want to thank you. Those of you listening now, parents too, teachers too, listening now, I want to thank you all for tuning in. If you'd like to submit a question for possible future discussion on Spaniard School here, the podcast, please visit the links below. If you're watching or if you're listening via podcast app, click one of those links below. If you're watching on YouTube, click one of those links below, submit it. I'll add it to my folder for future Q&A episodes. And again, I want to thank you all for listening to Spaniard School. It's very important to me to share these messages for you on a weekly basis because I think back to middle and high school and I know how difficult and challenging it is. Parents, those of you listening, coaches, teachers, please utilize Spaniard School in your classroom, in the car with your kids, however you can. And if you're not yet subscribed, please search out Spaniard School on your podcast app, click subscribe. If you haven't yet left a review, please consider doing so. And my website is charliespaniard.com. Again, these links will be below no matter how you're watching or listening. If you would like to talk on scheduling fall assemblies, if you'd like to talk about scheduling an assembly at your school, please visit charliespaniard.com, click on speaking, fill out the short form, and I'll get back to you. In the meantime, thanks for tuning in, folks. I'll see you next week on Spaniard School. See ya.